Let's move on to the agenda today, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker for the morning. I think I will go with a good majority of the room already know Gaurav, but for those of you, this is the first introduction. Gaurav has nearly a decade of international operating experience with Citi and other organizations. He's been a serving advisor and continues to be on a number of Silicon Valley tech companies. Certainly from our perspective, he continues to be and has been a thought leader in terms of integrated risk management. And I think you'll all share, if you've ever spoken to him, there is a deep domain expertise there and a legacy in terms of the governance, risk management, and compliance solution. So, to get us back on time, please put your hands together and welcome Gaurav Kapoor, our co-CEO and co-founder, to the stage. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Good morning. Check. Good morning to everybody, and thank you for coming from all across the world, actually. I just heard that we have representatives from 20 different countries across the Americas, Europe, UK, of course, and many of the Middle East and Asian countries as well. So thank you for making the long trek. I hope this 1.5, 2 days will be worth the time and the effort. This is actually our 12th year of the GRC Summit in London, which we call the European GRC Summit. And I'm very delighted to be here with all of you. Like John mentioned, we had the opportunity to meet many of you yesterday when we kickstarted the half-day event with some real-world experts. But to have 250 plus global GRC professionals in a single room is quite exciting. And I'm sure you yourself will start to feel the power of connection in the room and during the day as we go along. We've always been quite fortunate to attract some of the best talent in the leadership, in not just GRC leadership, but overall leadership. In the past years, we've had Ajay Banga, who used to be the CEO of MasterCard, and now he's the World Bank president. Nicholas Taleb, who is the author of Anti-Fragile and The Black Swan. Former late General Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State for the United States. Gillian Tett, who was the editor of the Financial Times. Lord Blair, the former commissioner of the London Metropolitan Police. So we not only get a lot of thought leadership from what I call people who've been in the risk industry, but leaders like these who are managing risk on a regular basis. Over the next several hours, we really hope that you will learn from this powerful network of professionals all across who have come from varying industries, varying maturity cycles in their life cycle of risk, essentially, from different functions that are in this room today, and ultimately walk away with a feeling of renewed energy, learning, but also excitement about what the future holds for risk and compliance professionals overall. Please also do take the opportunity to network and meet with the people. We have, like I said, we have people from across the world in various functions. I'm just going to pick some names that I've worked with in the past. Jackie, who's the group CIO for all risk functions at Barclays, she's here. We've got Jacob, from Nordea. He heads up the group risk function. Dorothea at Siemens Energy, head of internal controls. We've got Azizi, who's made a long trip here, coming in from Petronas in Malaysia, and he's the chief compliance officer there. We've got Benjamin, who leads risk at Nationwide. Some of you may have met him yesterday as well. Philip, who's again made a long trip from Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, one of the largest, sovereign funds in the world. And thank you all for coming, and all of the rest of you as well. If you look at, just the reflections from last year, last time we were here in London almost exactly a year ago, 11 months ago, I had talked about how the strongest leaders start to emerge from really tough times. It was and is truly an unprecedented time in history with multiple shocks that we continue to face. COVID, global trade wars, massive conflicts, add to that rapid inflation, even recessionary climates in certain parts, deglobalization, supply chain disruptions that were happening. And you start to add to that rapid digitization that's continuing to evolve quite even more rapidly now. The whole world of cryptos and the metaverse and AI, the acceleration of AI, all these have caused a lot of what I call opportunities, but also risks, as we know. when we founded this company 15 plus years ago, and my co-founder Gunjan, he's right here, he's the executive chairman as well, we really had a vision of creating an integrated GRC platform. And we had worked with, at that time there was no GRC, there was no integrated GRC, there was siloed functions. We worked very closely with Gartner, Forrester, Michael Rasmussen, who some of you have met, to shape the definition of this industry. It took time for the market to realize the criticality of the power of connection, if you will. It was really around the 2008, 9, 10 financial crisis that banks and then subsequently companies realized the criticality of bringing first, second, third line of defense closer together. If now, fast forward, in the last 1 year alone, if you look at it, not just organizations, but even regulators are focusing on this. You look at operational resiliency that's emerging from the PRA, not just for banking organizations, it is the aggregation of op risk, compliance, third-party, cybersecurity, and business continuity all converging under the umbrella of operational resilience. So the frameworks have to be established. While it is not necessarily directive yet, but we do see that regulators are also starting to get directive. If you look at the DORA Act, DORA is being driven and is intended to bring incident management, operational resilience, and cyber all under one umbrella, so organizations can start to get more and more connected in their approach to managing risk because the pace and velocity has changed. So if you look at it, fast forward a year, I think we can all agree that the year flew by fairly quickly. Much remains the same. While a lot was accomplished in terms of new and advanced innovation, both in terms of the technologies, the trends, the disruption that have happened, but also how organizations are starting to look and manage risk, from our vantage point. And at this point, I know it is a very sensitive topic, and emotions, narratives, and political debates are pretty high right now, but we will all be remiss if we don't take a moment to reflect on the fact that thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Israelis, Palestinian men, women, and children are suffering and are under severe conflict and risk at the moment. Our jobs, our challenges, and complexities truly play pale in comparison to what is happening out there. And I would request that we all stand up for just 1 minute and observe a minute of silence to grieve and honor all those who have suffered and continue to suffer in the conflict, not just in this conflict, but other conflicts that are happening in the world. So I'd request you to please Thank you. As we reflect, on the last year, we also saw a lot more of stories and risks that when risks collided, the severe impact of multiple risks coming together. If you look at, what happened with the Heathrow Airport last year, we saw literally thousands of flights getting canceled on a single day or a couple of days because of the automatic flight planning system being out of action, for several hours. And once you got into why that happened really, it was triggered by a single piece of data in a flight plan that was wrongly input into a system by an unnamed airline. A small thing can trigger a very small thing, and we've seen failures, where cyber attacks have been caused because of a breach at one store, and the entire financial system got at risk, as an example. If you look at the banking crisis, and we're based in Silicon Valley, we saw it very close to, to where we were. And this crisis, in March last year, which really dominated into several other banking failures that happened in the US. And similarly, it kind of extended itself into quick consolidation of banks in the US, in Europe as well, as you know. And this collapse happened because multiple things were not working and they were not connected. If you look at some of the reasons, lack of diversification of a portfolio, a classic not realizing that when a bank run happens, now in the new world, because everybody can digitally, withdraw money within a matter of seconds and not line up in front of a bank, those things, and then the whole inflationary elements that was not compounded or accounted for, they all came together at the same time. If even one of these had not happened, or the Silicon Valley Bank had set the right controls in place to manage even one of these, for example, not withdrawing money that quickly, as an example, things could have been different here. So we look at this, and the more recent Maui tragedy, if you look at it, okay, it was really devastation in Maui, where a series of failures that the tragedy, was compounded primarily because we had a lot of loss of life, but it's also because it was not just an isolated event. All of these things happened at the same time. And some of them were natural, okay, in the sense you couldn't have done much, but there's some things that could have been managed, when these risks start to collide. So why are we talking about this? Why is it so important that leaders now, risk leaders, start to think about connected risk? It's primarily because market expectations are changing, and we have to change. As public failures on display, make headlines, the tolerance for disregarding risks and understanding the connected nature of risks is decreasing. There is no appetite now to look at risks in a siloed way, and we all know that, just not from public events, but what happens in our companies as well. More and more risk professionals now have to have a seat on the table, and I'm using the word risk broadly, and I do mean risk, compliance, audit, third-party, professionals, but more and more of our GRC professionals have to be at the seat, at the table with the CEO, with the Chief Strategy Officer, with the Chief Revenue Officer, to ensure that we are making the right decisions, not just to be defensive about risk, but also to make the right decisions, in terms of where we need to take more risk to be able to, create more top-line growth as well. So that's the why. Now how? To truly survive on risk, or thrive on risk, this is a theme. We have to ensure that businesses are looking at making have the right business intelligence to both calculate, measure, and predict risk, where we are willing to take more and more risk as well, to thread the opportunity that might be there in your organizations. Changing the mindset from a reactive to a proactive is super critical right now, and that's how we define, thrive on risk. You really have to ask yourself whether you're managing, you're embracing, or you're thriving on risk, and that's a journey some of our customers are starting to get onto, where traditionally manage was about just, looking at it from a siloed perspective. Embracing is about, looking at it from a single point of view, and thriving really is about making business decisions, investment decisions, based on your operational risk and your compliance and your audit profiles overall. So if you look at it, these are the three maturity curves on which organizations are riding, and we've been quite privileged to be seeing this at close quarters, as organizations mature into that journey where they are starting. I'm seeing insurance companies starting to make decisions on their product lines, okay, based on the operational risk profiles. I'm seeing, cyber professionals, the CIOs and CFOs making decisions on investing, based on the cyber quantification that's emerging out of their cyber portfolios, essentially. Not just defending, but also making the right decisions going forward. So if you look at it, if you go to the what, basically, here, there are two things, we are talking about connected GRC. And I know Michael Rasmussen is in the room. We'll talk more about it, Prasad, and our product teams will cover more about it from a product perspective. But the first thing about connected really is making sure that we are connecting the entire ecosystem. If you look at it right here, considering the pressures, on market standardization around risk, operational risk and operational resilience last year, in November at this summit, we aggregated MetricStream along with senior executives, some leading financial service organizations, and many of you are here today, from organizations like Barclays, Danske, London Stock Exchange, M&G, Nordea, Standard Chartered, UBS, and many others. We came together and recognized the importance of creating a market standard or an industry model for operational risk management, and really have developed a very core foundational model from both a strategy and an execution perspective that should drive the today, tomorrow, and the day after for operational risk and resilience. Very similarly, we've worked with companies like Verizon, Aon, Shell, Petronas, and many others on the cyber risk operational excellence, because we markets are demanding this connection and making sure that we are coming together to create the standards and make it easy, for the risk professionals. And there is collaboration needed in this area. Similarly, many of you might be aware, we are working with a very strong group of central banks in Europe. So central banks of Luxembourg, Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, and many others have come together to create common standards for themselves, for the central banks, on how to manage operational risk, audit and business continuity. And we're working extremely closely with them to ensure that as they're creating their frameworks, they reduce the amount of what I call distraction, and they can create standards across the countries to be able to manage risk better, essentially. And then, of course, these forums that you see here, our summit here, if many of you are involved with our product councils, please be involved even more, okay, because we get the power. It's not just us learning on how to continuously improve the innovation spectrum. Also, a lot of companies come together to decide what is important and not important, as an example. So all these, come to what I call a true connection of the ecosystem at level 1. And then, of course, our overall, from a product strategy perspective, and Prasad, our co-CEO, he'll cover this along with Joy and Raghu, who are product and engineering leaders, as we go into the next sessions. But there are 3 foundational elements or 3 foundational pillars for us on our connected GRC. Number 1, it's cloud. Number 2 is continuous. And third, it's cognitive. And this is the future. And we've talked about this to many of you, in our private sessions as well. But if you look at it, cloud is no longer about hosting on the cloud or it's on-prem. It's really about providing a simplified, personalized user experience across mobile and the web, which is tied to internal and external data systems and content, to bring it in real time. And because of the volume of change that is happening in the market around regulations, around risks, organizations have to be able to manage it simplistically. So our whole effort around low code, no code that the teams will talk about, okay, that's extremely important. The second thing is continuous. So with rapidly changing risk and regulatory environment, the whole world of annual, quarterly, weekly assessments, manual assessments on sample data is no longer enough. We know that. So what we have to do now organizationally is to ensure that really embrace real-time continuous assessments and testing of whether it's controls or risks or assets or whatever your object portfolio is, leveraging large populations of data rather than samples, and really hyper-automate the workflows and assessments of these. We've built over 300 plus APIs. Again, the team will talk about in the last 12 months. So it's been quite a journey for us to ensure that we become true to the journey on continuous. And finally, cognitive. So over the years, organizations have clearly collected vast amounts of data natively in the GRC systems, but also in transactional systems. And how do we ensure that AI-centric workflows and risk quantification can help organizations leverage data and be more predictive and versus just prescriptive to understand emerging risks and make more strategic decisions. So that takes me to, AI, which is a huge, in the last 1 year, it has taken major strides, as you can imagine. I still remember here, we're just on the early signals of generative AI and OpenAI coming on, and how much has changed in the last year is unbelievable. Just the velocity and the volume of movement in that area. I'll just keep this simple. We have actually invested on AI for the last 4 or 5 years, building very GRC-relevant capabilities around AI/ML. Whether it is AI-infused workflows in your workflow system, or the recently launched Aspire that I'm sure Raghu will talk about, a little later, and essentially making sure that we have a very strong AI-powered knowledge-centric GRC, which can be used for multiple use cases, but we have been centered on making it true for GRC. We're not a generic AI platform. We're making it centric for GRC. And therefore, we all know that the opportunities and risks both are very high with AI. As we are forward-looking, we want to make sure that forward-looking risk ability or risk visibility is possible through cognitive capabilities. Large amounts of data are being captured, and armed with artificial intelligence, businesses can start to flag issues very quickly, risks, opportunities. We'll have David Story from Denata shortly coming up and talking about how they aggregate not just system-based information, but also observations from 50,000 people on the field, frontline people, and use different elements of data structuring to figure out where the patterns are in the airline world, as an example, right? So we see all this coming up, and as also we are going to continue to see evolution in the AI market, which GRC can adopt. So just as an example, you've probably heard of Codex. This is a business application. Less than a year ago, people hardly knew about this. Today, organizations at volume, obviously keeping data privacy and all of that stuff in mind, they're creating code that is accelerating development, adoption of technology systems and use cases across the world. Imagine if your organizations and us, we could all use this and make sure that the acceleration of our applications and use cases, get further accelerated. If you look at Stable Diffusion, there's another consumer application that allows you to do a text-to-image generative. It's a text-to-image generative AI application. Imagine every organization, could use this, from branding to marketing and even GRC programs. You can start to create your audit reports, through this. The amount of efficiency it can create is significant. However, we have to do it in a way that we are responsible. And then you've got the AI avatars. Now, people call them bots, avatars, etc. These are digital humans that, are already there. Consumer applications are already there with the avatars, where, you can start to develop AI technology to rapidly create educational content, in the risk world, to get people gamified on how to, evolve the compliance programs that you have internally. All these are super critical, and there are really, many, many opportunities in AI that we are starting to look at. What we have today, and we're going to do in the next year or two, our product teams are going to cover that. And then we're also looking at these opportunities to make sure that on one side we are excited, but we also will make sure that we do the governance of these applications properly. With this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually request two people to come on stage just to bring this to life. The whole power of connected, the power of the continuous cloud and cognitive companies that are on the leading edge of doing what we just talked about, and still there's a long way to go. So let me actually first introduce Sarah. Where is Sarah? Sarah leads operational, we'll give you a hand in 10 seconds, but she leads operational risk framework and systems for the Nationwide Building Society. Some of you might have met her yesterday. And she's really responsible for the setting of all the enterprise risk management framework, for the organization. Very experienced, 20+ years of experience, but I'll let her experience talk. She comes on stage and talks about Connected, what she's done here. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you. Morning, everybody. So as Gaurav said, I'm Sarah. I'm a Nationwide lifer. So I've been there for 24 years, 14 of which doing risk management. Last 4 to 5 years implementing MetricStream, looking after the operational risk framework, because those two things go very well together. We don't want them separate. So yeah, I'm going to go really quickly through our journey over the last 3 years, but shameless plug. I have got a session coming up at 10 to 3, 2:50 later, where I can go into more detail about any of this stuff that is interesting in terms of our zero customizations. People are really interested about how we managed to do that. So we've got a much longer session later, so I can go through any of that with you. So just to go through our journey so far. So 1 week before lockdown, we implemented the operational risk app of MetricStream. We were very lucky because we got to do loads of face-to-face training sessions on a sandbox environment before that, so everyone was good to go. But obviously, as you can imagine, we had to rapidly change how we did our training. We had to make sure that we could do them on Teams calls. We had to do self-serve. We had to make sure we did recorded sessions because we no longer had that kind of hands-on training approach. So straight into live, straight into lockdown, and it was all about how we adapt to make sure that MetricStream was successful. We did have a no customizations approach, and we stuck to that. There were minor ones, which I'll talk about later, which were non-negotiable but still upgrade safe, but we absolutely made sure we stuck to that, along with adopt, not adapt. And we did adopt, we didn't adapt, and I can be really clear on that. We changed a lot of things to make sure that we stuck to out of the box, and actually that is proved really successful in terms of how we've gone forward and how we've embedded the tool and how our risk management framework works. One thing I bang on a lot about is that I had a business team, not an IT team. When we implemented it, we were all risk professionals. I had one IT guy to make sure that we weren't doing anything wrong and to make sure we had a support model and things like that once we went live. But the rest was a very business-led team, and I can categorically say that 80% that project team did was business readiness. It was all about making sure people were ready for what was coming, they were ready for the change, and they were ready to adapt and to adopt the system and to make sure we were good to go with the data and all that kind of stuff. We'd had tools in the past that had been delivered by projects, or they'd included the whole first line in terms of how it was going to be built, and it created monsters. So we were able to learn lessons from that. So over the last 3 years, we've embedded the solution. The fact that I'm still standing and still looking after the tool, as many of you will know, GRC tools aren't really liked by people, especially new ones, and people who implement them even less. So actually, the fact that I'm still standing and looking after it and it's still going strong is testament to the fact that it worked and it's successful. We developed data quality reports from the get-go on my team. So we looked for silly things like incidents that have been logged but no issues and action plans have been assigned to it, risks that had no controls against them, all those kind of things, controls that hadn't been tested, so that we pulled that data out and we made sure the tool was being used so that people could rely on the data. We then handed those reports over to the first line to run themselves to make sure that actually they were the ones responsible for the data. They had to run those quality checking reports, and we kind of stayed on the edge and made sure that that was still happening. So what I'm talking about later in the session is the fact that we implemented the reg change app on top. So we made sure the operational risk app was working. Then we said, right, we're ready for something new now. We want to connect our compliance assessments. So I'll be talking about it in the later session about how all the challenges around sticking to the same taxonomies, the same level of risk, and all that kind of stuff that we went through to get the end result. And we implemented the reg change app earlier in the year. So what's next? Development of BI. So we've started doing this. We've got some really super clever data analytical people, and we gave them access to the data on MetricStream, and they produced some really good-looking dashboards. But immediately we were drawn to the fact that they'd connected relationships that shouldn't really exist. So they looked really cool, and people who weren't risk people said, oh, this is a really good view to have. But actually it was telling the wrong story. It was connecting controls to risk that didn't exist in the system. They were just data items in the system. So we quickly had to put some principles in place, and my team had to make sure what was coming out and what those data analytical people were doing was actually telling the right story. So with that in mind, we're going to go one step further, and we're looking at AI solutions, what we can get possibly outsourced, to make sure that actually when data is being connected, it's being connected right to make the right decisions. It's not being used in a way that it shouldn't be. And then integration with supporting risk and control systems. We very deliberately have left this right till, to make sure MetricStream was embedded. We knew what level we wanted data in the system so that we could then go, okay, let's look at ServiceNow, IT instance, let's look at lower level granular information where we can connect it to MetricStream, but it still tells the same story. We're not letting lower level granular information in, we're making sure it connects, and actually it's enabling us to tell that story from that higher level. So that's what's next for us. So it's been embedded now 3 years. We continue to evolve. We have MetricStream platform change forums where any changes people want to make to the system, they have to come along with a business case. Everyone around the table has to agree. And then we work with MetricStream to make those changes, or some changes like drop-downs, etc., we can make in-house. So we've got a lot of governance and control to ensure that this system is still thriving. It's been confirmed as an authoritative data source for board reporting. So the risks that go up to our executive risk committee and our board risk committee come directly from MetricStream, which, believe it or not, makes people make sure that information is up to date as well. So that's where we're going. That's where we're going next. But in the session later, I can talk about how we made sure we had no customizations, how we made sure we had a business team, how we made sure we had a sandbox to train on, and all that detailed stuff, if people are interested.
Thank you, Sarah.
Welcome.
Yeah, like Sarah said, this journey actually started about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's been what I call a sequential roll-in of, how the market's evolving around the cloud, how continuous, the things she mentioned about data coming in from different sources, and now, graduating towards more cognitive, predictive, decision-making. Very different story now for the second one, no pun intended, David's story. He comes on, and David leads all of enterprise risk and group safety for Denata, which is a big subsidiary of the Emirates Airlines Group, the Emirates Group. They manage 140, I'm taking away a little bit of the thunder, but they are responsible for managing 140 airports across the world. So they are the outsourced entity, and they manage not just the Emirates Group airlines, but several other airlines, the outsourced activity from ground transportation, baggage handling, food delivery, security check-ins, airport security. So it's a pretty large size, organization, and the impact is pretty large, from everything from security to life to, their entire food chain, etc. So David, and they've done a fabulous job of bringing a lot of these things that we talked about together. So David, welcome to the stage here.
Thank you, Gaurav. Play the video.
You make promises to carry, to care for, to take across the world. Precious things, people, looked after along the way. These promises don't happen by magic. There's an invisible world that works like clockwork to make it all seem effortless. We are the behind the scenes, the feet paddling under the water, the many moving parts that make it all happen. We relish the preparations. For us, it's not getting ready for the big day. It is the big day. Every day. Over 39 million dishes to delight, or over 3 million tons of cargo, from heavy machinery to thoroughbred horses, and everyone exactly where it should be. Over 500,000 aircraft, received, refreshed, and ready to fly. Or over 1 million great escapes, made great. Always delivering, and doing it with amazing precision. Ingenuity. With a smile, 365 days a year. We ensure your promises are delivered. In the air, on the ground, by your side. Denata.
Morning, everyone. Thank you. It's great to be here again, and thank you to Gaurav and the rest of the team. It's been a fantastic partnership over the last eternity. Is it 8 years? I think it's something like that. But it's certainly been a journey for us as an organisation, and we are slightly different to most of you in the room. We use the platform and the product primarily for health, safety, and compliance purposes. I know a lot of the people in the room are sort of from the banking sector, but the principles are all very much the same. So in terms of our journey, we were initiated as an organisation in 1959, and we've been using, as I say, the product since 2015. So in terms of the platform itself and the product, the nucleus of everything that we do is our Denata Safety Management System, or our DSMS. So this is central to how we build our compliance framework within what we call Denata Hub. So Denata Hub is our in-house terminology for the MetricStream product. And like I say, it's been an 8-year journey so far. We've got, I think at the moment, John, 25,000 users, I believe. So it's a global footprint, we continue to go through that evolutionary journey. So the beginning, phase one, was 2015. So we launched what was called One Safety. So that allowed us to have a product that was fit for purpose to be rolled out as what we call One Donata. So if you're a ramp agent in Sao Paulo, for example, you would have the same access credentials, the same tools as someone would have in London Heathrow, for example, or someone in Erbil in Iraq, or Sydney in Australia. So that was the start of something. And the first tool that we adopted was incident management. That was fundamental to developing the initial aspects of a safety management system. Then the global expansion. So a lot of work was done to roll out the products across not just our airport operations division, but also the travel group and the catering and retail division as well. Then continuous monitoring came in. So the use of tools to perform regular audits, both first and second line. And then phase four, which is in the sort of last 6 to 12 months, has been how we strengthen our approach to innovation. And we've recently just signed up to roll out the Euphrates system upgrade in April next year. So just to echo some of the sentiments from Gaurav at the start during his introduction, was 3 focus areas: cloud, continuous, and cognitive. So just to give sort of our applications in numbers in terms of the usership, it is quite significant. So you'll see that our documentation management system has just over 20,000 documents present. That says 16, but in fact it's up to 20,000 now. We have what's called the auditor, so we can do regular inspections and audits, and we have over 40,000 observations that are reported within the platform. In addition to that, we also have the ability to report incidents, and that was, as you've seen at the start of my presentation, that was the genesis of the platform back in 2015. So one of the fundamental aspects of our vision, mission, and values is safety and security. And we really push the agenda to have leadership really pushing safety and leading safety from the top of the organization. So what we've done over the last sort of 6 to 12 months is build applications within the software so our leaders, our CEOs, MDs can go out and perform leadership tours throughout our global businesses. And we have set KPIs and targets associated with those. We also have stop observations. So our blue-collar workers, our frontline personnel, can go out there and report any hazards or observations or threats and risk throughout the global business. Incident management, as I said at the start, is core to everything that we do, particularly as we continue to build our safety management system. And we also have the auditing and continuous monitoring tools. Policy and documentation is also fundamental to what we do. So we have what's called the Donata DMS. So we have the ability for anyone in the world to access the documents and have an automatic or automated read and sign capability. Enterprise analytics. So now we've got a huge database and volume of data. And now we're starting to move towards the ability to potentially predict when future events are potentially likely to happen. It's the start of a long process, but we believe ultimately that will become the gold standard. So in terms of our journey, we've come a long way in the last sort of 8 years. And what I'm going to do during the session this afternoon, I think around 1:30, is I've got 30 minutes with everyone, aren't you lucky? And I'll be able to provide more granular detail and insights into each of these areas. Thank you very much. Gaurav.
Thank you. Before I summarize, I have to tell you, and some of you may have heard this, when I was negotiating with the Emirates Group on the contract, they wanted to put a clause there saying all upgrades forever are free, of software. I said, no problem, as you can do the reverse as well for the Emirates flight tickets. They didn't agree, of course, and we settled amicably. I still remember that negotiation with them. But here's the thing. So you heard, from two very powerful leaders on their programs, and how they've run it. Now, as we go into the future, one of the things we're all worried about is to regulate AI. Now, I personally and all our teams are very much in favor of expanded innovation in AI. We're going to see huge benefits, but we have to be exceptionally cautious about how we regulate AI. And there is going to be fear. And that's where the emergence of what we call GRC for AI. We talked about AI for GRC, and there's going to be a very strong emergence of governance, risk compliance for AI. Just like, a lot of the banks have model management, they've got governance around their assets, etc. This is going to take shape, and it will still, in my opinion, take a year or two for everything to kind of shake out and how to govern models, not just from a model management perspective, but also how is data going in, how are you regulating the data that goes in, what are the privacy concerns, all of that stuff. So there is a lot of fear here, but we've got to, kind of embrace the fear and go forward. So as examples, all of these are concerns. Job displacement, is it a real concern? Yes, it is. But we also feel that it can create a lot of job opportunities. Security and privacy is a huge issue. Today, even with OpenAI and ChatGPT, we're already starting to see the friction points of where organizations don't want to expose anything, even though there are benefits because of privacy, concerns. But can we get past this? Yes. Can there be flawed decision-making? Absolutely. We're talking about AI, we're talking about ethics, we're talking about data input, output, all of that stuff, and we're starting to see a lot of false positives sometimes that can come out of it, and decisions can get flawed because of this. We're working with a bank where, they had, in one sample group, they had 10,000 controls, essentially, out of which through the AI engine that we launched, we figured that 22% of their controls was actually redundant. 22%. You're talking about a 500 people full-time group, 22% is 100 FTE equivalent. However, there were still false positives in that we had to solve for before we came to the conclusion that these values can be realized. So at the end of it, we absolutely need to ensure that we have, a number of things that are driving the balancing act here. I'm sorry, this clicker is not, yeah. So if you look at as I close today, there's some important points to remember here. We must all really rise to the occasion because the expectations are changing for all of us in the market in terms of skilling, in terms of how we look at information, how we make decisions. We have to change our mindset from being reactive to proactive, and not be a risk-adverse community. We have to start to think about how to thrive on risk in the sense that how do you take advantage of all the risk intelligence and start to port into proper decision-making, from a business perspective. And we can do this by leveraging the connected GRC journey. It's no more, it's really no more optional. We have to get these things together. Sarah talked about the fact that you could have data coming in from, transactional systems or ITSM systems, but it has to get tied in if you have to get a true view of overall your risk intelligence overall. MetricStream as a company, we've been on a clear and consistent journey, focused on serving our customers, our employees, our shareholders, with a lot of passion and continue to lead the innovation and in the GRC market, if you will. And we've also been pretty passionate about taking this to the front line. It's not just about the second line, third line users or the first line of defense, but the front line itself. David talked about how, tens of thousands of people are using the application. At a Standard Chartered, we've extended it to the entire employee base as an example. At a UBS, we have tens of thousands of users using it. So it's also about taking it to the front line. And we currently have probably 1.5 million-ish number of users across the application, across the world, across all our customer base. We have also, in the last couple of years particularly, have followed a very strong balanced growth and profitability model and have a strong positive operating cash flow. Our business is strong, and we need to make sure all these things are important, as you can imagine, from a growth and profitability perspective in these markets. Most importantly, as a company, we started this journey. We continue to be laser focused on customer experience, whether it's product experience. We may not have everything. We may not, be everything to everybody. We may still have some gaps in the product, but at the end, we are listening carefully, we are working carefully, and ensuring that it's not just about the product, but also the engagement, the responsiveness, the support, and how we can help you create adoption within your own organizations. And finally, I would definitely, first thing is that there's a lot of our leaders here. I'm not going to introduce right now, but we have all our global leaders in the room, essentially. I mentioned about Gunjan, our chairman, Prasad, our co-CEO. We have Rahul, who's our global head of customer success and services based in London. We've got Raghu, who leads our product management. You'll meet him soon. Joy, who's our head of engineering. Mike Johnson right here, who leads all of our global business development, sales, and channels. So we have a number of leaders. Manu, who's behind this whole summit. He leads our marketing and strategy. So you have an opportunity, and I may have missed a few, sorry, but you have an opportunity during the next day to meet all of them and really power up and provide us the feedback on what we need. Most importantly, I'd encourage you to spend the day, step out of your comfort zone, normal routines, leverage the talent leadership that you see here, share and learn both. And as you walk out of this evening today, is going to be a packed day, as John mentioned, but I do hope that you feel energized and you've learned something new and inspired, because the world of risk is changing rapidly, and we all have to be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Gaurav, and particular thanks to Sarah and David for sharing their insights. A quick plug for later on this afternoon. Both will be back on the stage going into a little bit more detail that they had to so briefly skirt across for this session. I also like to thank Gaurav for, I suppose, painting the picture for today in terms of our why, what, and how. And you will see a theme of the cloud continuous and cognitive theme from the technology that underpins the outcomes that we'll talk about.